I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and today I'm here on the phone with Dan Everhart, the outreach historian for the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office, and we're going to be talking about the theme for the Idaho Archeology and the Historic Preservation Month. But before we get started into that, Dan, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and this role that you are in?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm an architectural historian. That means I'm a historian who specializes in documenting and researching, photographing historic places. My career has mainly been spent in Idaho with the Forest Service, with the Idaho Transportation Department, and for the past 8 years with the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office.
Has there been like a favorite thing that you've been able to see or learn about in this job?
That's a really great question. You know, I have had so many wonderful opportunities to go places and meet people, see things that many Idahoans wouldn't have a chance to do. It would surprise you how many times we're out taking photographs of a historic house or a commercial building in a downtown somewhere, and a property owner will invite us in to their house and they want to show us their historic building. It's wonderful. People are so proud of their history, oftentimes so proud of their history, and they love the idea that someone from a state agency cares about that history too. So I've been in some pretty wonderful places. I have to say one of the highlights was to go to the top of the dome of the Idaho State Capitol building, something that I'd wanted to do for, well, maybe my entire life. And here I was climbing to the top in these twisting staircases. And it was a wonderful experience that the public can't, readily access for themselves. And there I was doing it. But that sort of experience has been, typical of my time here. And I do that all over the state of Idaho, from the far southeast corner all the way to the Canadian border. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah, that's incredible. Idaho is definitely it's a long state, and there's a lot to see. And that's cool that you get to be in the kind of like the forefront and see these places. And I think through the recording and through the photographing, that kind of does give more access to the public on these places as they're preserved and recorded.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do that. I mean, we do this as state employees. We do this for the citizens of Idaho. We document these places so that people will have access. Sometimes you won't be able to visit these places yourselves, but you'll have access to the documentation that we produce. And so it's a wonderful privilege and a pretty awesome responsibility to be able to represent Idaho history and its historic sites.
And the theme for 2026 is the signs of change. Can you tell us a little more about why that is and kind of what that means?
Well, there's always a little bit of a play on words here. The built environment, that's, how we refer to these broader concepts of historic places, whether they be buildings or railroad tracks or old signs. The built environment is constantly changing, and there's no stopping that change. We work to document places before they disappear, but we also want to document those places to give them the possibility of a future life. Sometimes that's because they'll be standing there for another 100 years, and sometimes it's because they'll be standing there only in our photographs. And so the built environment is changing, and every year we choose a theme. We've had We've had themes of all types. Sometimes they're archeology specific because it's Archaeology and Historic Preservation Month. Sometimes they're the built environment, so historic architecture or buildings. But this year we chose as our theme historic signage. Historic signage, mainly you would think about neon signage around Idaho's downtowns or on our highways across the state, but they don't have to be neon. They can be other types as well. There are movable signs like Betty the Washerwoman here in Boise that was recently made a city landmark by the city of Boise. She washes clothes in a washing tub on Vista Avenue. She's amazing. In downtown Blackfoot, or just on the outskirts of downtown Blackfoot, there's a wonderful 25-foot tall woman who advertises a restaurant, and she doesn't move, and she's not neon. She's just this wonderful, iconic sign. But whatever the type of sign, these historic signs are now more rare than they've probably ever been. Their heyday was in the 1950s and 60s during the sort of peak moment in the nation's automobile culture. And sometimes we'll see them preserved and sometimes we'll see them fall into disrepair. But we have a choice as Idahoans in how we manage these historic places and these signs in particular. And we wanted to draw attention to them for this year's theme. And so that's what our poster does. It talks about signage and illustrates them in a wonderful painting that was commissioned by a Boise artist named Janny Racita, who painted signs across Idaho on a backdrop that shows them on a winding highway.
The radio station here, we got one of the posters, and it's quite a beautiful art piece. It's very representative.
Yeah.
It has a lot of, it kind of gives you a better idea of like signage. Like you said, there's some that are more, I guess, traditional, like neon lights, and then there's ones that are more kind of like these big statues that you've been talking about. So it definitely gives you a picture of how these like signs kind of show a piece of the culture and also advertisement of the time, and kind of has become nostalgic and something that represents a piece of history.
For sure. Absolutely. And there are communities and individual businesses that have chosen to invest or reinvest in these signs. So not every sign is abandoned or derelict or in danger. Some of them have been actively preserved and will, be there for a while. The big frost top root beer mug in Ashton is on the sign. And not too long ago, there was a question about whether the widening of an intersection there, a highway intersection, might necessitate the removal of that big root beer mug. And I'm pleased to say that it's still there because the project worked around it to make certain that it could stay. And there are places like Pocatello, which have invested huge amounts of money and energy and volunteer hours in programs like Relight the Night is what they call their program there in Pocatello, where they've invested in and relit a dozen or more neon signs, including this wonderful Greyhound bus depot sign where the Greyhound dog, the mascot of the bus company, it flickers on and off in a motion that makes the dog look like he's running. And that sign, as well as, like I say, a dozen others, have been carefully and lovingly renovated and restored by the folks in downtown Pocatello. and they're so proud of their program, and they should be. So it's not all derelict signs and danger of loss. Sometimes Idaho communities and individual property owners are putting real money and time into these signs to make them shine again.
Yeah, that's awesome. And for the Idaho State Historical Society, what are kind of some of the efforts or things that they do in general in their efforts of preservation and history?
Yeah. Well, the State Historic Preservation Office has several programs. The program that is the most well known by Idahoans and folks across the nation is a program known as the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register program is a partnership with the National Park Service, and it designates and honors sites across the country, sites across Idaho, which have value for one reason or another. They could have archaeological significance. They could be interesting examples of engineering. They could be a great example of historic architecture. And this honorific designation, a listing in the National Register, is something that we manage and here at this office. And not every place that we included on our poster. In fact, I'm not sure any of the places we included on our poster, these signs, are listed in the National Register, but sometimes they can be, of course, as part of a larger site, and they represent that history as well. So that's our probably our most well-known program. We are also responsible for the implementation of a federal law, which helps Idahoans secure access to information about historic places and archaeological sites, and ensures that federal agency actions don't inadvertently harm those sites. So that's our federal regulatory compliance work that we do. We manage a grant and partnership program with local governments across the state of Idaho, and I'm so proud to say that the city of Rexburg is our latest and newest certified local government. They were made a certified local government just a couple of months ago, and they are working hard in the community of Rexburg to make certain that local priorities for historic places are met, and we help fund those projects.
I love the support between state and also like around, what is the word I'm looking for? And also around like the different areas and parts of Idaho, and how they've all participated in some form of historical preservation. I think that's quite important. To you,
Absolutely.
What is kind of like the significance of preserving history and archaeology work?
I think historic places, and I would include archaeological sites in that category of historic places, I think historic places provide so much value to us as Idahoans or Americans more broadly. We live in a fast-paced culture. Sometimes we can forget about the history of our communities or the places that made us who we are as Idahoans or Americans. We can easily forget those concepts when the places that represent them are gone. And so the value of preserving these places is to help tie us to our history, to remind us that not every place is a generic strip mall like every other community has. No, we have places that are significant to us individually as communities, as people, and they tell our stories, and that's where we have to be careful. We have to make sure that the stories that they tell are broad and meaningful, not just to a few, but to the widest section of the population as possible. These are stories that are told for everyone, and so it's not just about the wealthy. It's not just about the pioneers. It's about the space race and women's stories and the stories of other underrepresented communities. It should be broad and wide in the way we tell it, and we're doing our best to make sure that's true.
I love that. That's, I think, well said. There's a lot to be said, and there's broad communities and things that need to be preserved and to be remembered. I like how you talked about things that are significant to us, like finding meaning in the places that we live in. I think that's quite important in the preservation process and remembering the histories of our areas. So for the Idaho State Historical Preservation Office, to find more information, would you go to history.idaho.gov?
It's history.idaho.gov/SHPO. That's the acronym for State Historic Preservation Office. History.idaho.gov/SHPO. And so I would encourage folks to do that. They are also welcome to find us on social media. And so we manage both a Facebook page and an Instagram page, and we post images about the work that we do. If you were to look for us on Facebook or Instagram, you would find us at Idaho SHPO, at Idaho SHPO. So those are both Facebook and Instagram have at Idaho SHPO. Well, you'll find information about the work that we're doing. So we're happy to have people visit us and contact us. There's lots of information on our website, and of course, we're thrilled to talk about this program and Signs of Change with you, Abrielle. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close this conversation?
History is important. The work that we do to preserve it is important, and it doesn't happen by accident. People have to actively and proactively invest in their history, and communities and individuals all across the state do that. We're so happy to facilitate that process.
I'm Abrielle Millett for BYU-Idaho Radio, and today I've been here on the phone with Dan Everhart, who's the outreach historian for Idaho State Historic Preservation Office, and we've been talking about the Archaeology and Historic Preservation Month and the theme for this year, Signs of Change. So thank you so much, Dan, for your time and talking to me today.
Thank you, Abrielle. Appreciate it.